Perfect. It looks like we have a large group today, and we are just going to get started. So want to welcome everyone. I'm Stuart Blumenthal with ETHOSystems. We're going to go over our 1099 year-end processing and some 1099 training. And actually, we're going to go a little bit further, and we're going to start going into some of the Canadian aspects as well for our Canadian clients. So just FYI, we'll be hitting a couple different areas today for year-end processing. If you have any questions along the way, feel free to use the Q&A feature within the system. The Q&A feature, we'll be looking at that information. If you want to copy the PowerPoint when you're done, just put your email address in there and we'll make sure you get a copy of the PowerPoint. But unfortunately, all the phone lines are muted because of the large number of people on the call today. And we'll just jump right into it. So I know that some of you have been through this before, and I'm going to be kind of going through some of the important aspects of year-end processing. The first thing that you have to remember is you really want to make sure you close your books every single month. That is probably one of the most important, and especially at the end of the year. And people ask, why do I need to do that? And the most important reason is you want people to stop posting to those subsidiary modules by mistake. And that's the most important thing. You can always reopen up a period, so don't feel like you have to always close it and it's locked for good at that point. You can reopen it, but closing the books really makes sure that you prevent people from accidentally making mistakes and entering things they should not do in the wrong period. We have all seen those clients where things are posted way in the back after they say, okay, the year is done, and they don't close the books. And we have seen things posted way in the future. So things to be looking for before you close the books. One, make sure you look at things such as your open commitments, your open purchase orders, your any open contracts. I know it sounds stupid, but we have people that have purchase orders out there from 3, 4, 5 years ago that are still waiting to convert. Doesn't help you. Start cleaning those up, get those cleaned up this year, and make it part of your month-end process. And I apologize if you're on this call and you're one of those that have a lot out there, but it's really good to start cleaning those up. If you need help cleaning those up, there's a couple different ways of doing it, but including there is a way of setting up a transaction definition that says closed transaction. And if you need help, our team is able to help you with that. The other thing that you want to make sure about is that if you are using inventory, I'm a big proponent of using something called reconciling purchases clearing. For those that don't know what purchases clearing is, it's when you receive the goods and you have not yet received the invoice. So when you, from an accounting perspective, you debit inventory and you have to credit something, you're not crediting accounts payable because you haven't received in the invoice yet. You have to credit something else, so that's called purchases clearing. To me, that has to be reconciled because that is a liability account for year-end purposes. So again, that's something that we highly recommend from purchasing and from order entry. Next one, again, if you're using inventory control, make sure review the valuation of your items and make sure that matches the general ledger. That's really, really, really important. For jobs and WIP, for jobs and projects, review your WIP. Make sure your WIP is all done, especially if you're using the new WIP module. Make sure you've gotten the new WIP features within the construction. Make sure you've got all that, you've got all those recognized, you've done your over and under billings, everything looks really good there. So important from that. And then time and expense, verify all your time and expense timesheets have been posted. It's funny, we actually see clients that have time and expense entries that have, that they never finished off. And so again, make sure they're all closed out, make sure they're all been posted, make sure that everything's been done with it. It's a good time to do that. From a cash management, obviously, make sure your bank and credit card reconciliations are complete. And then from an AR and AP, this is probably the #1 phone call we get on support, is that my subledger does not match my general ledger. And there could be so many reasons behind that. It could happen because You have a transaction definition that got set up wrong, or that someone made a change to it. It could happen because someone posted something directly to accounts receivable or accounts payable directly, which you can prevent that from happening by disallowing direct postings. But it is so important to make sure that your general ledger matches the general ledger. And what we always recommend is, like, when, for example, on the screen here, the AR ledger says based upon, and make sure it says GL posting date, because that's the other mistake that everyone makes, is that they leave it on document date. So make sure it says GL posting date, and then review that and make sure that matches the general ledger. If it doesn't, contact our support. Usually it depends upon how far back it goes. Sometimes you have to, your subsidiary ledger is 99% time the right number. There's always going to be that one client that says it's not, but usually your subsidiary ledger is the 100% right number. You got to get your general ledger fixed. And then what I always tell clients is that you want to make sure that going forward, that for at least for the first couple weeks, you reconcile that on a daily or weekly basis. That way you can find out where it's going off, and it's really important from that aspect. Again, that's probably the #1 call we get from support. It's like, hey, that's off all of a sudden. And again, there's a couple different reasons behind that. So the modules that do require closing, time and expense, cash management, accounts receivable, payables, and general ledger. They can be done from the top level or from the entity, but you can have certain entities. Remember, you can have certain entities that are closed so you can close out one entity and not close out another entity. So that's a nice feature there. And the other thing is you don't need to close the general ledger right away. So you don't have, so for these first four, you can close them and leave the general ledger open, but the general ledger does not need to be closed at the same time. So a couple tips, closing the books. We already hit that point there. Books can be reopened. We talked about that. You can close one entity or all entities. Again, we talked about the disallow direct postings feature. And one thing I always recommend is making sure security is set to only one person has access to this for closing. I always believe that it's important that from a security point of view that you lock that down. Before you go into next year, so next year is the holidays. I know a lot of people have off most of next week or part of next week. Make sure you go into your reporting periods and set up your 2025 reporting periods. Now, if you're a new implementation, that could have been done for you. It could have been done. It could have been done that they've got the next couple of years set up. If you've been live on the system for a while, these might not have been set up. Obviously, in my environment or my screen here, it's still back to 2021 for some reason, but make sure you got your reporting periods set up. And those will comprise of, for your example, your month endings, and as well as your quarters in there. So starting and ending dates. If you need help doing that, please contact us. Is happy to help you guys get the reporting period set up. And that's in the reports area. There is a feature under import data. It says generate them. Please don't do that. If you've accidentally ever created a posting way in the future, it will generate all your reporting periods. And I have seen clients that it didn't just create 2024, 2025, it created it all the way through 2099 or something along those lines. So please don't generate them automatically through the import data. I know some people say, oh, I can do it that way. I've just seen it backfire. So that's just words of wisdom there at that point. So for those in the United States here, I'm going to speak to you first. So obviously we have 1099s in our system. When you're setting up your vendor, again, some of you are been on the system for a while and some of you have not. And so it's really important to make sure that your vendors are set up correctly in the system. So under the vendor screen, I've got my vendor screen here. Under the additional tab, make sure that their tax ID number is in there. You need that number. You have the 1099 name. Enter the name if it's different as the print as name, which is on the front tab. And then make sure you choose the right 1099 form. And that's really important. So what you do is you click on the word 1099 form and you choose the right one. I think, nowadays everyone knows the interest, dividend, and NEC for non-employee compensation, and then the miscellaneous. But make sure you choose the right form and make sure you've got the right box in there. And when creating a new 1099 vendor, you will see 1099 eligible. Once saved, then it will, you'll see it this way. So again, if you go into an existing vendor, this is what it will look like. You also want to make sure that under your contacts list, you got the right contact for the 1099 as well underneath there. So when you say same as vendor, that will pull the primary address at that point in the system. I know this is way old. It's been now many years, but there is no miscellaneous box anymore. It's non-employee compensation. So when this screen allows you to, what's nice is that when you go into the 1099 box, you can enter in your beginning balances. So if you did a mid-year conversion, these can be imported in. There's an import file that can bring in your 1099 balances up to, prior to your conversion. But also if you went, oh gosh, let me just go in and I know what the balances are based upon the payments that have been made. Remember, it's not based upon the actual invoices in the system, it's based upon the payments. So if you entered some bills in and you haven't paid it, they're not subject to 1099s. And if you entered a bill in the previous year, but paid it in January of this year, then that would be subject to 1099 in the current year that it was paid. But this is nice though, you can enter in those numbers. You can also enter in negative numbers. So for example, if an invoice was entered in and you went, oh, that's really not subject to 1099s, you can come in here and make it a negative amount to adjust it at that point here. And I think we hit the last bullet point already. Try not to read every bullet point on the screen. If you set up a vendor incorrectly, when you select the form, it will ask you if you want to change the historical transactions. This is the important part. This process only updates transactions already tagged for 1099 treatment. And so if it's not tagged correctly, if that original bill was not entered in, it does not change it to a 1099 at that point. So, so just keep that in mind. It's only, it does a good job, but it's only doing it for transactions that were tagged for 1099. So just keep that in mind when you see this here. Usually what a lot of our clients do is that they'll say don't update, and then they just bring in the balances at that point. Also, key point, remember that your employees can also be set up as 1099s as well. So if you have an employee that's not truly an employee, but a subcontractor or someone you pay, that you set them up as an employee for some reason, you can pay them as a 1090 or anything you do. You can set them up as a 1099 down here in the employee screen as well. So when you go into the system, you will see that there's a couple areas here. So under the 1099s, there is a 1099 report. In fact, let me just show it through this way. It'll be easier. So under the screen here, now it's not wanting me to do this, sorry. So under reports, you have your 1099 report there. That's where you'll see that. And then you have your export 1099 file, and then you have your 1099 file submissions. We'll get into that in a moment. You also have down here the print the 1099 form and the 1099 form and the 1096s. We'll talk about printing out those actual forms. So again, this report is what's great about getting kind of where you're at today. Print that out, audit that, make sure it's right. And then when you do your actual 1099s, they're all done through here at that point. If you do not see them on the system, we're going to get to a few things, but one, make sure you have permissions, but also you have to make sure that it's all set up correctly in the system. So in the past, and actually the screen should have been updated, and I apologize, this was not. So what you're going to do is that if you do the export, this export out to 1099, the e-file submission is what you're going to click when you want to go and do the tax bandits. So they broke it out in this year. Apologize, I should have updated the PowerPoint. They should have they have two areas. There's the 1099 export, and then there's the 1099 e-file submissions, which uses tax bandits. It is the easiest way of doing your stuff electronically. If you're having more than 50 1099s, I believe you have to do that through 1099. You have to do that electronically. So it's all incorporated using tax bandits. If you do not have tax bandits turned on, or if you don't see it, what you have to do is make sure in your setup options, you have to make sure that you have turned on 1099s. You have to, there's a box that says turn on tax bandits in this AP setup options, which I'll show you in a moment. But also, most importantly, you have to make sure that cloud services are turned on. And so that's an additional setup option you have to do. There is no additional cost for that turning on cloud services, but you just need to make sure that is turned on at that point. Oh, sorry, I said 250. I said 50. It's usually 250. I'm sorry, my brain shut off for a second there. So again, when you go into the setup accounts payable configuration, you'll see a couple of setup options here. Enable 1099 flag override, enable 1099 form box override, and last but not least, enable 1099 e-powered by tax bandits. Make sure that's turned on. If it's grayed out, that means the cloud services has been turned off at that point. Couple things on the tax bandits. So again, you do all your 1099s here. You got to make sure everything's ready in Sage, and then you create your 1099, you review the report, and then you send it over to tax bandits. These are the current pricings that I did change this one off the website from Sage Intacct pricing. So as you can see here, the federal pricing for the first 10, this is the price for the forms. To file them. They also offer state e-filing if you needed to, and the online access. And then if you have to send them via postal mail, that is also option. And again, they handle the NEC and miscellaneous interest dividend and all the other ones. So that's the pricing that applies for tax bandits. If your federal taxpayer ID number is missing, that can be set up in the company setup screen. And then one other thing that in the future, as you're setting up your vendors and you're like, oh my gosh, why did all my vendors this year not get set up with 1099s right? One of the things you can do is you can set up, like based upon a vendor type, you can say that these are all subject to 1099. Some people have broken them out, their vendor types that way. And so that's a kind of a tip that I recommend. If you're realizing that a lot of your vendors were not set up with 1099 information to begin with. So again, kind of talked about a little bit, but your 1099 data can be imported into Sage Intacct. There are basically 3 uploads: the vendor, employees, the 1099 balances, and the transaction updates. I would say work with the Sage consultant if you wanted to bring the imports in. Run the 1099 report first. I think I've said that a couple times. And then if your forms are a little bit off, there is a offset aspect for vertical and horizontal alignment. So if you just need to adjust them a little bit, please do so. Your forms, you can order them from Sage. Or not from Sage, but there's a couple websites, intact.dsa.direct.com or Forms for Intacct. These are guaranteed to work with Intacct. They're not through us. So you can order them directly and get them pretty fast. make sure you order them as soon as possible, especially obviously the holidays. Everything's getting delayed because of the mail service or being overwhelmed, but so get those ordered as soon as possible. Don't forget to change the year before you print the form. So we've seen that a couple times. People are like, hey, my numbers are wrong. Well, did you print them for 2024 or 2023? So that's something to keep in mind. Don't wait till the 31st. Our support backs up. Just so you know, first week of the year, support's really busy. We get a lot of calls that week. And then by like the 10th, it kind of dives down or drops down in terms of support. And then all of a sudden, the last 2 days, 3 days, it gets hit all of a sudden. And we've had people like calling us at 4 o'clock in the afternoon saying, hey, I'm trying to get this all set up now. Please do not wait till 31st at 4 o'clock. I will guarantee you it will not be able to, we're not gonna be able to get it done in time by the end of the business day. So just keep in mind that try to get your 1099s done as quick as possible. It's based upon that check. So if you've done your last check run on December 31st, theoretically, you can start doing your 1099s at the end of the first week of the year. If you make a mistake, there is a corrected box under the 1099 printing. You can do corrected as well when you're reprinting out your 1099s. Couple other things to point out in this whole process here. If you are in Canada, let me bring up the right screen here, sorry. There is a option for you to enable the T5018 form. So again, that is in your accounts payable setup option. So you want to make sure that if you need to produce those for any vendors up in Canada, you can do that. And then once you turn that on, if you come to all here, you can see that and you can export out the that file format, that XML file format, then you send over to the government at that point. So there's a little bit different. They're not going to use tax bandits up in Canada for that process there. I think that was really it. And then one of the other questions we always get asked is on 1090, on the 1096s, that this, as you see, the system does do that as well. So we do print out the 1096 and we can send that as well. That will be part of the tax bandits, but if you want to do it yourself in the system, we do handle the 1096 as well. Oops. I'm going to take a look for questions here. I have gone very, very quickly, and I want to make sure that there's no questions that came in here. Is there any update that needs to be done? No, so everything that's in Intacct right now is 100% ready to go for 1099s. There's no updates that need to be applied. Sage applied those with their November update or throughout the year, so that takes care of that. Another question that came in, do I have to use tax bandits for electronic filing? There are another provider, I think, or two out on the market site, the Sage Intacct marketplace, that also does electronic filing for 1099s. To be honest, I wouldn't use anything else. Just because it's in the system and it transmits it automatically. I have known a few clients that have exported it out from Sage and used the system that they wanted to send it, but they just exported it out and then imported it in on that system. So it's not automatic. We'll support you as much as you need on the Intacct side, but once you export it out, that's, we're not able to really help you there. If you have questions on tax bandits, you're more than welcome to ask them. I know that a few of you on the call have used tax bandits in the past, and it's sometimes a little bit of a painful process. And I do realize that they have gotten better each year. So I would say, again, work with them on that. If you have intercompany, one other thing to keep in mind is that in your setup of your, if you have multiple companies, the 1099 balances are separated by legal entity in your system. So that's one last thing to keep in mind, is that if you have 4 or 5 different legal entities, and I think that's where it causes a lot of problems. Like all of a sudden you have to sit to one entity, and then you have to do another entity, and then you have another entity. And so if you have like, 20 or 30 entities, or I know some people have like 100, that takes a long time. So it is entity by entity specific when you're sending it over to Tax Bandits. So keep that in mind. Also, get into Tax Bandits as soon as possible. I would recommend, getting logged in there, setting up your username and password as soon as possible within there. One other thing within here is when you're in the submission here, there is a box that says need help e-filing, and they have some videos on here as well. So you might want to take a quick look at that. I know a lot of you are some of you are very self-sufficient. So again, please feel free to watch those videos. And that should be a good way of getting started on some of that as well. Great question so far. Make sure there's no other ones. You guys are quiet today. So again, close out your modules. Make sure your 1099 balances are right. Make sure your AR and AP are reconciling to the subledgers are important things. If I was to take any of those golden nuggets from today, those are kind of the 3 major things that I would do. Oh, and order your forms ASAP. Don't wait till the last second. And you just order them directly. Just a couple last things. People have asked about some webinars coming up, and I just wanted to provide you a couple webinars that we're going to be doing in January. I can't believe that is like about 12 days away. We are doing next January 16th, we are doing our Sage Intacct document templates training. So this is a new one. This one has been asked for by a couple clients, and love the fact that you submitted feedback. What we're going to be teaching you to do is how to modify forms within Sage Intacct. So this is not reports. These are forms such as your invoice form, or your purchase order form, or your, I think I said invoice form already, but purchase order form, or your lien waiver form, or your AIA form. How you can do this yourself by going into Microsoft Word, installing the little Intacct add-in, and kind of giving some tips and tricks on that. So make sure if you ever want to change forms, it's a good training. Make sure you have a good understanding of Microsoft Word and some of the mail merge features within there. It really does help. And hopefully we'll get into some of the calculations you can even do in there, which is really cool. Didn't think Word can do that. February 6th, we're going to be going over the 2025 R1 release, which is going to be released the next day. It's coming in really early this year. So just keep it, so the 7th. So just make sure that you attend the webinar on February 6th of all the upcoming changes. I do know there's some cool stuff coming down next year. Specifically on, they're adding some additional fields on vendor compliance and some additional things on that. They're adding a more 365 lookup lists and stuff like that. So please feel free to attend that. We're doing something on Sage Field Operations, SFO, work orders. We've had some clients ask about that, so we'll do some training on that. And then in February, we will probably have another webinar on Valexio. Which is a Excel add-in that's really, really powerful, that links into Intacct. And they came out with some really cool construction reporting that pulls directly real time into, it pulls into Excel. And we want to do some training on that product. And if you're interested, it's always good to get the training and then look at the product. So that will be in February. With that, I see a couple of people ask for the PowerPoint. I will send that over to you, and I'll make sure that gets sent over. If that is it, I want to thank you for everyone's time today. As I said, I kept this 30 minutes to 45 minutes, but I wanted to make sure it was worth everyone's time. Otherwise, thank you very much for attending, and happy holidays to everyone. Thanks for being a client of ETHOSystems. Have a great day.